Magnus Carlsen is the greatest chess player of all time, and in this video, Magnus is going to give all of us a masterclass on how to play for a win with the move 1, knight h3 as white. Now, this move 1, knight h3 is absolutely brilliant. I mean, it gets 2 exclamation points simply for style alone. Magnus is saying, I have no respect for my opponent, and I'm going to beat him regardless of what I play in this game. Now, in this game, he's playing the experienced Russian Grandmaster Alexey Dreev, and Alexey is on to Magnus Carlsen's game. He knows that Magnus Carlsen just unleashed some massive disrespect in this opening, and with that in mind, Alexey Dreev responds with the even more diabolical move, knight to h6. Oh my goodness, it is move 1, and both players have already moved their knights onto the edge of the board. What the heck is happening in this game? Now from here, Magnus, he just keeps going with his weird idea. Instead of playing a normal move, I don't know, d4, here he goes for the audacious move, f4. And of course, Magnus Carlsen's idea is to go knight h3, then knight f2, because why not? You're Magnus Carlsen. Now from here, Alexey Dreev, he responds by striking in the center with the move d5, and Magnus knight f2 as planned. So far, so good. Now in this position, Alexey Dreev finds the really creative idea, knight to g4. The idea is these knights are going to be traded, the bishop defends the knight, and what the heck is Magnus doing with the knight on f2? It's about to be traded. Well, he displays e3, attacking the knight with the queen, and now Alexey takes on f2, Magnus takes back, and now Magnus has this awful looking king on f2. I mean, already black is just much better, and here he expands his lead with the move c5, taking control of the queen side. Now Magnus, as expected, he just continues doubling down on his weird plan. He goes b3, he wants to fianchetto the bishop on b2, getting it on that long diagonal. However, Magnus is not fighting for the center with, like, I don't know, d4, bishop b5. These would have been better moves here. Okay, from here, Alexey, knight c6, again, logical development, and now the most logical move would be bishop b2, of course, but Magnus, he keeps showing his flair. What is this guy doing? Bishop b5 on the board. Man, Magnus Carlsen's games are so hard to commentate. All right, Alexey, bishop d7, blocking the pin on the knight. Now Magnus, bishop b2 and a6, giving the question to the bishop, where do you want to go? Once again, simply taking on c6 would be best, but Magnus, he wants to lose a tempo and bring the bishop back to the really weird square d3. What the heck? Now the bishop's blocking the d-pawn from going to d4. This is going from weird to absolutely insane. Now Alexey, queen c7, Magnus goes knight c3, and Alexey e6. So far, very logical development from Alexey Dreev. I mean, despite the weird knight h6 opener from Alexey, so far he has sort of a reverse Nimzo Indian setup as black, and he's looking very solid. Now Magnus, I have no words for this move. Queen to h5. Magnus, what the heck are you doing? I mean, it's actually not a bad move. He is preemptively putting pressure on that h7 square, making it hard for black to castle on the king side, but still, come on, Magnus. All right, Alexey, bishop e7, again, more logical development, and here Magnus starts an artificial castling plan, which is actually the right idea. He brings his rook on h1 to f1, then he's going to go king g1 next. So from here, Alexey, bishop f6, and king g1 from Magnus. So far, so good. And now Alexey, he challenges that bishop on the d3 square with the move knight to b4, putting the question to the bishop, what do you want to do? And this is actually quite a difficult position for Magnus. What do you do about that bishop? If you don't move it, black's going to take on d3, giving you double pawns on the d-file. However, if you do move the bishop, that pawn on c2 is going to fall to the knight. Now, this is actually quite complicated. The best line here for Magnus is bishop b2, simply sacrificing the pawn on c2, but then you go rook c1, knight b4, and f5, and here you do have decent compensation for the pawn. So instead of that, here, Magnus, he defends the pawn, rook a to c1, but that actually drops the pawn on a2, because of course, after knight takes a2, that knight on c3 is now pinned, because if you move the knight, you lose the bishop on b2. Oh my goodness, now the knight here, it's even attacking the rook on c1. Magnus moves the knight, and Alexey brings the knight back to the b4 square. And here, Alexey is up a clean pawn. Of course, that pawn on a2 fell. So what the heck is Magnus supposed to do here? Well, unless Alexey makes the mistake of castling into that checkmate threat on h7, Magnus is going to have to make something happen right here, right now. And with that in mind, he strikes on the king side with the move f5, and things just get completely crazy from here. Now, Alexey tries to block the center with the move e5. However, Magnus, he strikes back again with the move e4. Oh my goodness, now the best move here is d4, again, trying to keep the center closed. However, Alexey goes for the much spicier move, c4. He must be auditioning for the Spice Girls. This move is as spicy as it gets. Of course, now there is so much tension with these pawns in the middle of the board. Things are going to get blown open in the center. So Magnus, he starts taking the pawn on d5 with the knight. Oh my goodness, Magnus is leaving the bishop on d3 hanging, but of course the queen on c7 is now being attacked, and that is the tactical idea here. So Alexey takes back on d5, and now bishop takes c4. Okay, Magnus is temporarily down a piece. However, this is the idea. That knight is currently pinned. As the knight moves, then the pawn on f7 is going to fall because the queen and the bishop are both eyeing that square right now. So Alexey, what is he supposed to do? Well, in the game, he actually lets the pawn fall. He goes knight b4, and before Magnus takes the pawn on f7, he kicks the knight again on the b4 square. c3, knight c6, and only now, queen takes f7. Wow, what a position. Okay, here after king to d8, Magnus is currently down a piece, but he does have 2 extra pawns and an attack in compensation. So overall, Alexey is still better, but Magnus has a fighting position, which is exactly what he wanted. Now Magnus, bishop a3, excellent move. Simply getting that bishop to the more active diagonal here where nothing is blocking it. Now Alexey, he is feeling the heat. He goes back with his bishop to the e8 square. Of course, there are now 2 pieces attacking the queen of Magnus Carlsen. He has to decide, do I want to trade queens or do I want to fight on? And as expected, he decides to fight on. Queen d5 check, getting the queen out of the attack. Now Alexey, queen d7, once again offering the queen trade. And now Magnus Carlsen, the best move for him here is simply queen to c5, threatening queen b6 and keeping the queens on the board. But instead of that, he goes for the much flashier move, bishop to d6. Okay, what's the problem with this move? Well, it's simple. Here after bishop e7 from Alexey, not a very hard move to find. And now the bishop on d6 is pinned. I mean, if that bishop moves, the queens are coming off the board, and Alexey's going to have a holdable endgame. Well, fortunately for us, Magnus Carlsen is literally a chess genius, and he finds a way. First, he takes the bishop on e7, and now, of course, the queen is pinned to the king, meaning queen takes e7 is not an option. Therefore, the king has to take back on e7, and now queen c5 check. Oh my goodness, Magnus is back in the game. Here we go. Okay, Alexey, queen d6, once again offering the queen trade. And again, Magnus declines, queen b6 on the board. Oh boy, this is a critical position in the game. And Alexey here, he makes a big mistake, bishop to d7. His idea is he wants to connect those rooks on the back rank. However, this is a little bit slow, and Magnus immediately capitalizes with the central break, d4. Of course, if your name was literally Stockfish, the better idea in this position would have been rook f3, then queen f2, bringing the queen behind the rook, and only then breaking in the center with the move d4. However, Magnus Carlsen's choice in the game, d4 right away, was also plenty good. It's the right idea. You're just trying to blow open the center. Now, Alexey, knight to d8, once again offering that queen trade, and once again, Magnus Carlsen declines, queen a5. Okay, knight c6, once again hitting the queen, and now if Magnus went queen to b6, we'd have some sort of draw by repetition with both sides going back and forth in this position. So, of course, Magnus declines. He goes queen to a2. And from here, the queen has access to that f2 square we just talked about. So excellent idea from Magnus. And now Alexey, what the heck is he supposed to do with that king on e7? Well, in the game, he finds the very creative idea of going to d8 and then c7, trying to tuck it away. So king d8 on the board, then rook d1 from Magnus, lining up the rook with the queen and the king, and then king c7, completing the idea. And now, likewise, Magnus, queen to f2, bringing the queen to the ideal f2 square, just like we talked about. Now from here, black continues regrouping, and he gets his rooks into the game on the d8 and the f8 squares. He goes rook to d8, then followed by rook f8. And oh boy, just look at this position. There's so much tension in the middle. The rooks and the queens all lined up with each other on these D and F files. I mean, if I didn't know any better, I'd say the position here is about to explode. And sure enough, that is what happens. Here, Magnus, he goes for the finishing blow, b5. His goal is just to blow open that queen side. And that is what happens. A takes, bishop takes on the board. And now Alexey, he does the same thing on the king side with the move g6. Of course, the pawn is pinned on f5. You do not want to play f takes g5, rook takes f2. That would be game over. So instead, Magnus tries to keep the king side closed. He goes for the move f6. And of course, that pawn is defended twice by the queen and the rook, so it is okay for now. Now from here, Alexey goes king b8, trying to get his king over to safety, but Magnus, he is not letting up. He has a really cool idea for the bishop. He wants to go bishop c4, c4, then bishop d5. And from there, the bishop puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the queen side, and the queen and the rooks have open access to the b file. So in the game, bishop c4, then bishop c8 from Alexey, and bishop d5 from Magnus, simply eyeing that b7 square. And here is where Alexey Dreev makes his fatal mistake of the game. So far, he's still hanging in there. However, after this move, bishop e6, and oh no, it is pretty much all over from here. Now, if you like solving chess puzzles, go ahead and pause the video and try to find the winning idea from Magnus Carlsen. This one is not necessarily a completely forced line, but it is a very powerful idea, and if you can find this one, you should be proud of yourself. Did you find it? All right, here, the key idea. First of all, you simply take on e6, not a very hard move to find. The queen takes back, and then here you simply go d5, hitting the queen and the knight. Of course, the combination is not over. Here, black can go queen d6, and if white takes the knight on c6, then black takes twice on d1. Now, overall, that is still winning for Magnus, but he has an even stronger idea here. Instead of taking immediately, he goes rook to a1. And here's the problem for black. That knight on c6, it's unbelievable, but it is trapped. Oh my goodness, a7 covered by the rook and the queen. The rook here, the pawn here, the pawn here, the pawn on f6 here, and finally the rook and the king blocking off the back rank. Oh no, what is Alexey supposed to do? Here he goes, king c7, creating that b8 square for the knight, but Magnus sees it. He immediately takes, d takes c6. And now, after queen takes rook to a5, Magnus is threatening rook c5, pinning the queen to the king. Oh my goodness, here Alexey tries to hang on, king to b8, but then the finishing blow, queen a7 check. And then after either king c8 or king c7, Magnus simply plays rook c5, pinning the queen. And for that reason, in this position here, Alexey Dreev resigns on the spot to Magnus Carlsen. Wow, what a game. Now, if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and subscribe to my channel and check out my Magnus Carlsen playlist, and I'll see you in the next video.